We're going to center the company around the idea of bees. Bees are naturally altruistic animals. They work together as a hive to make their world a better place.
It's time to change the world.
There's got to be a better way.
It's time for something better.
You feel like you can't really make a difference, but the fact is that you can.
We're telling the stories of people who are changing the world and how you can help.
We just need more companies that are out there solving these problems.
Businesses, nonprofits, artists, and individuals who have found a problem and then created a solution.
If we want to have real impact, we have to do it together.
You'll come away from every episode with action steps you can take to be part of that solution.
We're never going to feel satisfied and happy if we just stay the same.
We can each change the world every single day.
People can actually come together and build a future for themselves along with other people.
Our daily actions have a massive impact. So what will we do about it? We can remake the world. Because guess what? We can. Hi everyone. I'm Nathan Gardner, and this is We Can Remake the World, a podcast about people who are changing the world and how you can help. Thanks for being with us. I want to start today's episode by telling you about my friend Joseph. Joseph is in his early 50s, originally from London, and we met by chance a few weeks ago. My dog, Trip, and I were out walking, and Trip was hunting for mice like he always does in some bushes near some water that we were walking by. And Joseph walked up and said hello. He struck up a conversation, and we had a really nice, easy afternoon chat. We talked about where he was from, where I'm from, the normal stuff. I looked behind Joseph while we were talking and noticed that there was this kind of outdoor living room set up behind a utility fence that was next to a tennis court, which we were standing by. There was a small stove for fires, a sleeping bag, a pile of books, some laundry hanging, and I realized that this was Joseph's home. Joseph told me he had served in the military and that it hadn't been easy. He's now homeless and makes a living by selling magazines that are printed for free for the homeless community so that they can make a small profit and cover their living expenses if they don't want to live full-time in a shelter. Joseph was warm, kind, good-natured, and funny. He had obviously been through some difficult times, but you could tell he really cared for the home he had created for himself. Everything was very orderly. He looked very clean. He told me that friends sometimes come over and they talk and have drinks around the fire. What struck me most was that Joseph looked like any other middle-aged man you might pass in the store or on the street. He wasn't your typical picture of a quote-unquote homeless person, which made me wonder, what is the typical picture of a homeless person? What if Joseph was just like the rest of us? Someone who is living the best life he can based on his experiences. This is how our guest today would look at Joseph, as just another person to serve, just another person to benefit with their work. Our guest, Dave Heath, CEO and co-founder of Bombas, believes that every human being deserves to be understood and served, to have dignity, to have their needs met, and not just in some kind of theoretical or philosophical way. Bombas, as a company, believes that everyone deserves to have what they need. Why should the homeless community be any different from any other community in that sense? I can't wait to share today's episode with you. It's so inspiring to hear about a business which has built service into their model for success, into how they operate every single day. I think there's so much potential in this conversation, just as far as what business can do in the world with the right mindset. Enjoy. Every day, millions of people around the world go to sleep without a roof over their heads. They may be sleeping in a shelter, on the street, in a subway station, or in a park. Some of them are fortunate enough to have bedding or other ways to keep warm, and some just get by with their clothes and whatever they've been able to collect from the streets recently. These are men, women, children, and sometimes families. In the United States in 2019, there were over 500,000 people living without a home who are homeless. In Europe, that number is over 700,000, almost 750,000 people. Habitat for Humanity, the well-known organization which serves the homeless with housing, estimates that roughly 100 million people worldwide live without a home. There are dozens of reasons an individual or family might become homeless, or even, in some cases, choose to be homeless. They might not be able to afford housing. They may have lost their income or struggle to find employment. There may be addiction or mental illness involved. Sometimes people just hit a wall and life gets really challenging, and it's difficult not to just throw your hands up and take what you can, which sometimes means living on the street. Regardless of the reasons why people might be members of the homeless community, there's a question that we, as people who aren't members of that community, ask ourselves every day, especially for those of us who live in cities, where we interact with the homeless on our way to work or on the way to the store. We wonder, what can we do to help these people? How can we be part of the solution for them, based on what they want, what they need? Maybe we give what we can if we have some extra change on us, or we offer some food if we've got that at the ready. But our guest today took the answer to this question one giant step forward. Dave Heath, CEO and co-founder of Bombas, wanted to start a company, and he wanted it to have impact. While brainstorming about what his company would be and do, Dave came across a Facebook post which stated that the number one most requested item from homeless shelters was socks. Dave had his aha moment, and Bombas was born. Bombas' first product was socks. Why did Bombas start with socks? Because homeless people needed them. Bombas was founded in 2013, and over its 7 years or so in business, it has donated tens of millions of pairs of socks to members of the homeless community all over North America. In just 7 years. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Dave's intelligence and his passion for both building his business and making the world a better place are so clear. He's so smart. He has so much insight and experience that I think all of us would find inspiring. And I have to wonder what our world could become, if more businesses of every kind followed Bombas' example. Thanks again, Dave, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pleasure. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start with sort of just a quick intro as far as Bombas goes. Maybe some basics. Where are you based? What do you sell? And what makes Bombas unique?
Yeah, so based out of New York City, and what makes kind of Bombas unique is, we're a direct-to-consumer apparel brand. We were founded on the mission of, when I found out that socks were the number one most requested clothing item at homeless shelters, I wanted to help solve that problem in our community. So similar to other give back brands, we donate a pair of socks for every pair of socks that we sell. We've recently expanded into t-shirts, and we've got other product categories coming out in the future where we'll continue our mission going forward. And the idea is that we want to be the first ever true consumer brand for the homeless community. So we design specific product for the homeless community in mind. So the same thought and process that we put into the consumer product, we put into our donation product as well. Really excited about building a brand that the homeless community can call their own and have a sense of dignity behind.
That's so great. I didn't know that you all actually incorporated servicing essentially the homeless community with your product into your design elements. Is it the same product that goes to both consumers and the homeless?
So it's the same base of the product, and then we change different features. So we reinforce all the seams, we add antimicrobial treatments, and then for the most part, we use darker colors to minimize visible wear.
Wow, that's so cool. Would you
Yeah.
speak maybe about just the importance of socks for the homeless community? It's something that I think once the idea sinks in, it makes a lot of sense, but you wouldn't necessarily connect the dots, off of the get-go. Why is that such a powerful gift to give someone who lives on the streets, a pair of durable socks?
Totally. And I didn't know this at first either. I had come across this quote on Facebook, and I couldn't believe that the number one most requested clothing item was a pair of socks, something that you and I have probably never spent more than a few seconds a day thinking about when we're kind of rummaging through our sock drawer. But the fact that this is seen as a luxury item for almost 650,000 people living here in the US alone was kind of a wild idea to me. So the more and more I researched it, I realized that when you're homeless, first of all, you're walking everywhere. So your main mode of transportation is, walking to and from wherever you're going. When you sleep, which oftentimes they're sleeping, out in public spaces, they're afraid to take their shoes off for fear that someone's going to steal their shoes. And so when you think about it, if you're never taking your shoes off and you don't have access to a washing machine, you'll wear through your socks quite quickly. And then because socks are a wear through item, most people don't think to go out and buy new pairs of socks to donate. So you and I, when we get a hole in our socks, we throw them out like every normal person and we go out and buy a new pair of socks. But because it's unlike jeans or jackets or, hats and gloves, those things often get donated in large quantities. But it's kind of the wear through items like socks and underwear and clean new t-shirts that often don't get donated.
Yeah, it really clicks and it makes so much sense again when you think about it and when you hear that. But I just think that's so great. And is that what initiated where you all decided to start as far as which product to create first? It was inspired by service, essentially. That's kind of you focused there because it was such a need for that community.
Yeah, and still remains that way. I mean, we've donated over 35 million pairs of socks to those in need, and we still have constant demand for more socks every day.
And when you were building the business model, did you all come to the one for one business model from the start, or is that something that you stumbled upon? How did you incorporate that kind of donation based element to your business model as you were getting started?
Yeah. So when we came up with the idea originally, or when I first saw that quote on Facebook back in this was February of 2011, Tom's Shoes was really the main business around. And, they were 5 years old. So they weren't exactly super established, but they obviously had tremendous amount of growth and tons of acknowledgement around, inventing kind of the one for one movement. And, in February 2011, a small little eyewear company called Warby Parker had just launched and they were doing one for one eyewear. And so when I saw this quote, I was obviously very interested in business and entrepreneurship. And I saw, okay, there's this shoe brand that's giving away shoes and wildly successful. There's this new eyewear company that everyone's talking about donating eyewear for every pair of eyeglasses that you purchase. And then I was like, well, maybe we can help solve the problem in the homeless community by donating a pair of socks. So it was kind of a right place, right time convalescence of all of these. Saw this quote and then seeing what these businesses were doing, myself wanting to start a business and then seeing the opportunity to help solve that problem kind of right in front of me.
I think what's so inspiring about Bombas is that you've really proven that a model like this works and that it can scale a business and be really successful on several fronts with social impact at the forefront. I'd be interested to hear what some of the challenges that you and your co-founder and your team have faced over the last few years as you've built this business from an idea into, the brand that it is now.
Yeah, I mean, on the starting on the donation front, I mean, outside of buying a bunch of socks and carrying them around with us in our backpacks to and from work in New York City and handing them out in person, we didn't know how to donate potentially tens or thousands or hundreds of thousands, and now looking at it, millions and tens of millions of pairs of socks. I mean, that's a lot of product to move. And we've since built an entire team and logistics arm around just the donation part of our business. But when we started, we were like, we don't even know where to begin. So I literally typed into Google, sock donations in the US, and one charity came up that like focused just on sock donations. And so I called them and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting this business. We want to donate socks. I don't know the first thing about donating socks other than in person. Can you help us? And they were like, yeah, look, if we can communicate and you can send us some, we'll make sure we get them distributed out to different charities throughout the country based on a need, which is, really what they served in the beginning. Since then, as I've mentioned, we've built out a team and network of over 3,500 giving partners across all 50 states that we serve directly by shipping, sock product all around the world.
That's amazing. Would you speak maybe about any of those organizations that you partner with to get those donations into the hands of the homeless? Are there any that come to mind that you think are just worth highlighting as far as the actual work that's taking place and the impact that it's having on the local homeless communities where those partners are based?
Yeah, there's one in South Carolina, for instance, and we'd been giving them socks for 2 years. And they'd sent us an email and they said, we just want to thank you so much for all the donations that you've given us. It has allowed us to not go out and have to buy socks of our own. And so since we've been able to save that money and provide a scholarship for 2 kids within the homeless community that they serve in order to go to college. And I was like, I would have never thought that by starting a sock company where we're giving socks, where, we wanted to provide a little bit of comfort, a little bit of dignity to somebody who's otherwise down on their luck and experiencing extreme hardship. But I never thought that it would translate into 2 kids potentially going to college. And that's just one story from one of our giving partners. We've got hundreds of giving partners that we work with, in the tri-state area. And those ones we have particularly close relationships with because we, in addition to donating socks, we as a company also donate our time. So last year, we collectively as a team donated over 10,000 hours of volunteer time. And so there's a tons of organizations like the Bowery Mission, the Bowery Women's Shelter up in the Upper East Side, New York City Relief Bus, the Grand Central Van Program, all of which, I regularly volunteer at. And honestly, I've got hundreds and hundreds of stories of personal accounts of getting out there and handing somebody a fresh, new, clean pair of socks and experiencing the joy and appreciation that they have. And again, for an item that you and I have probably never been without. Here we are. People are like, how did you know that this is what I need? I mean, I've had a lot of personal accounts. One that will always stay with me is I was walking up, Madison Avenue between 25th and 26th Street, just on the border of Madison Square Park. And this was early days. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago. This guy had a sign out and you said, "Hey, anything will help." And I leaned down and I said, "Hey, I don't have any money, but I've got some socks. Would you like a pair?" And he literally looked up and he's like, "That is the one thing I actually need more than anything right now." And I watched him take off one of his shoes on which he'd wrapped a bandana from his head around his foot to create a sock. And then on the other shoe, when he took that off, he'd literally put a plastic bag around his foot just to stop the abrasion. And I'm going, oh my God, I couldn't believe someone resorted to the point of putting a plastic bag around their foot because they didn't have a pair of socks. And again, I've got hundreds of accounts of these types of stories and those personal experiences. And again, because our entire team, I don't say is required to, but honestly, if you come to work at Bombas, you come to work there because you're excited about having the opportunity to give back and get involved in the community. And the first day that you join at Bombas, you're handed 10 pairs of donation socks to go out and hand on your way to and from work. So that you can have those personal experiences the same way that I have, which I know have been such a huge motivator for me every single day with this business.
That's so impressive. I mean, one thing that I actually was impressed by and really appreciated was as I was digging into Bombas a bit to speak with you today, I noticed that it seems like your values and your values are carried into every aspect of your culture. And even through your social media, I think some of the posting that you've all been doing from a social stance and around LGBTQ plus rights and, racial equality and gender equality, would you speak about how deliberate that was as you were getting started to build that into the DNA of your culture and to make sure that the sense of giving back and community were part of every aspect of your business? Because I think as somebody who, works in business, it's really inspiring and it's an inspiring example on a lot of levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if it was as intentional from where it's kind of grown into today, right? But what we did do very intentionally when we started the company, I had worked a bunch of places. I'd worked for a bunch of founders and CEOs, who micromanage, lack of gratification or appreciation for me as an individual or my contribution to the company. And, very much of the mindset, which I think unfortunately a lot of organizations have, which is I pay you a salary, so you better show up and do the job that I tell you to do. Whereas I think our approach and I think it's why we've attracted such incredible talent and such an amazing work environment, is I've kind of flipped that, narrative on its head. And I'm like grateful for the opportunity to pay these people and grateful that they choose to spend their time and their career at Bombas and contribute and bring the skill and expertise and passion and values that they have to my organization. Like, how lucky am I to have these people surround me and choose to spend their time this way? And within that, I think that mentality of just general appreciation for people and one another has created a lot of opportunity for groups that have since found us and since formed within Bombas, like the LGBTQ, which close to 25% of our organization is LGBTQ plus, identifies that way, which obviously we have a lot of work to do, but 8% of our organization identifies as Black. And during the Black Lives Matter movement, because of the space that we created, they felt that they had the opportunity to, really voice their experience and their need and desire for change. And because we've created such a supportive environment, we've then been able to lean in and really support them, which is, so I can't take credit to say, like, on day one that, yeah, I'd set out to create this unbelievably, welcoming and diverse culture, of which, again, we still have a lot of work on the diversity front to get to where even the standards that I now know we want to achieve. But I think that's part of it, right? Is that, like, myself, the rest of the founders, the rest of the executive team, I think the company as a whole carries no ego and no, self-righteousness around, saying, here's what we're good at, here's where we can improve, and let's have a conversation around it, rather than either A, pretend like it doesn't exist, or B, shame everybody into feeling a certain way. And so, again, I think holistically, because we together have created this space around our company culture where we're willing to do the work to improve. And that's a lot of that's rooted in our ultimate core value and our company tagline, which is be better. We look at Nike's just do it, and we want to have something that's like that we can own. And that's like, just show up and try to be better, whether it's be a better person, be a better spouse, be a better ally to people of color. It's kind of universally applicable to everything. I don't think anybody would ever argue not to be better at something. So I think that's where it's rooted. And that was something that we created from day one. And to see how that core value has evolved and touched so many different parts of the business, from producing a great product to how can we do better in the homeless community and serve those people, to how can we better treat our employees internally at the company, kind of permeates everything that we do.
That's great. And I almost wonder if it sort of is almost unconsciously built into the DNA of the culture simply because of the work that you do, the sort of focus on community that's part of everybody's daily
100%
tasks and focus. It's inevitably going to bleed into the humanity that they allow in others, their coworkers and everything.
One of the things that I always say is, when you go out, and especially living in a place like New York City, right, where you've got some of the highest density of wealth, in the world. And by most measures, everybody who works at the company is a professional, right? They're a white collar professional. When you as a team or as an individual go out and serve someone who lives in your backyard, who literally has nothing, and you're able to connect with them and hear their stories and just create a sense of empathy, you go back to the office. I mean, when we were in kind of the office environment, and if some coworker by accidentally ate your snack that you brought in for the day, or the cold brew went out, on tap was out for the day, or there wasn't enough Stacy's pita chips, like, you've kind of been grounded in a sense of humility, where all of a sudden you're not going to care about that because you just watched somebody whose first and only meal of the day was going to be a cup of soup. And similarly, like, I think that translates over to the human dynamic element too, where when you've seen the hardship that some people have, all of a sudden the little inter-office quarrels or differences in an opinion all of a sudden become slightly lessened or muted in that way because again your bar for comparison is okay, well, at least we're not disputing over who's going to sleep on which city block.
Definitely that sense of groundedness and perspective. I think, again, especially as you said, in a city like New York City, where it's very easy to get swept up into all kinds of different worlds, to have that groundedness, I think only serves folks who work in a professional setting. I'd like to just continue on the topic of your slogan and of the name of the company, be better, and an actual bee is the sort of logo of Bombas. Would you speak about how that was chosen as the logo and what inspired the name of the company? Where does the name come from?
Yeah. So early days, we kind of knew what we wanted the company to stand for, right? We knew that we wanted the brand to showcase some sort of altruism. One of my genius creative co-founders, Aaron Walk, who had spent a ton of time in the agency world from the creative perspective, he went away for a weekend and came back and he was like, I think I've got it. I think we're going to center the company around the idea of bees. And the name Bombas is derived from the Latin word for bumblebee. From a branding perspective, again, we love this idea of bees because bees are naturally altruistic animals. They work together as a hive to make their world a better place, right? And they will defend their hive if anybody comes to try to mess with it. Bees are also small animals that have a massive impact on the world. And so we like the idea that socks are small, but can have a really big impact on someone's day or someone's life, despite being how small of an item that they are. And that's where, again, our tagline, Be Better, which is spelled BEE, better, comes into it. And we've since incorporated a lot of hexagon designs and bee themed ideas into a lot of the stuff that we do.
I just love that Bombas kind of holds up this example of a business which can serve and also can succeed. And just from where you sit, I'd really be glad to hear about what you see as the potential for either a one-for-one model or other kind of social entrepreneurship models. Do you think that it's time for this to be at the forefront of all companies, regardless of size? What is their social impact and how can they grow it? And I'd really love to just hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see every business, I think we all would love to see every business have some sort of corporate responsibility charter or initiative built into their business model. And whether that's removing plastics from the oceans or saving endangered animals or, helping feed the poorest people in our country, in the world, whatever that connection is for each individual or each organization. If you're a pharma company, I'd love to see medicine that maybe is covered by insurance or that I have to pay out of pocket for as a person who can afford it is then made available to the parts of the population that can't afford it. So like whatever altruism or give back or social responsibility means for each organization and how it ties back into either their brand or their mission. And I think that's important because I think from a consumer's perspective, having that tie-in is really important. Like for us, it was to say, okay, socks are the most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. As such, we are going to donate one sock for every pair of socks that you buy. That's like a really easy thing for consumers to understand and wrap their head around. I had a friend who started a coconut-based ice cream business. And she was like, I really want to do CSR, but I don't know. I sell ice cream and I'm not really sure, what do I tie in? And I was like, okay, well, why don't you do some research about your supply chain and see if there's any opportunities there? And, of course, coming back, we realized that most of the coconut farmers are in the world come from third world countries and the wages are really low and it's pretty harsh living environments. And she went and I encouraged her to go. And I said, go talk to the farmers and find out what is the most important thing for them. And obviously, she came back and it was like, well, they want to break the generational poverty that their family experiences and they want to send their kids to school and get an education. I said, okay, well, what if for every cup of ice cream someone buys, you can find out that you will donate, a portion of proceeds or book supplies or whatever back to the coconut farmers to help, and so like you tie in this story that then makes a whole lot of sense for the consumer. I think when it's disjointed or when you're doing it kind of behind the scenes and it doesn't make a lot of sense, I don't think the consumer, you don't get the credit for it as a brand. And then the consumer can't retell that story. And then other people starting brands don't get to feel inspired by the fact that you're doing this. I mean, it is kind of a collective movement where we all need to be doing something in our own right. But as the entrepreneur, as the founder, you have to get close to it. You have to go do the research, go get hands on. That was like me. That was my version of giving out socks and having those stories and then carrying that motivation with me to like wanting to solve a problem that I then, experienced, firsthand, made it so much easier for me to get up in front of the company and tell everybody else that you should go do this and tell our customers about it and feel incredibly inspired, in that way. And so, yes, of course, the answer is I would love to see everybody do this, but I think you've got to do it with authenticity. And the only way to do it with authenticity is to like get out there and find something that's personally meaningful to you or your company or relates back to your values as an organization or ties into your product or your mission. And then tell the story, like continue to get out there and like be proud of the work that you do.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And the importance of being authentic, like you said, and almost simple and clear about, this is the problem that we're solving because this is where we sit. This is our piece of it. Nobody can solve every problem. Large organizations who choose a cause just to choose one won't have nearly as much impact and won't resonate as much with their customers if it's not kind of built into their own story. And
Yep.
yeah, I think that's really good guidance for anybody who might be building a brand and also for companies who are looking to build that giving back aspect of their business, that sustainability aspect, or that, social entrepreneurship if they're interested in it, just making sure that it resonates with them, because otherwise it likely won't resonate externally.
Exactly.
So I'd love to hear more also about the expansion that Bombas has planned. You mentioned moving into other product categories, and I'd be curious to hear more about that. And also if there's any other impact that you've tossed around or that you've considered, just kind of the growth trajectory that you see.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, we started off wanting to solve this one very focused problem, right? Get socks to the homeless community because socks are the most requested clothing item. The success and the speed of growth that we've experienced, I think, far exceeded my expectations and everybody within the organization's expectations. So we quickly found ourselves in a position where we said, okay, well, we originally set out with a goal to donate 1 million pairs of socks. And when you haven't sold one pair of socks or donated one pair of socks, you're like, 1 million? That seems like completely unattainable. We thought it would take 10 years to do. And it turns out that we ended up donating our 1 millionth pair of socks in year 2. We've since then donated 35 million pairs of socks total. And so could we donate 80 million pairs of socks a year? Would that satisfy the full demand, within the United States? And then once we think about expanding globally, and then we start to donate in other countries. So I think we're at this kind of interesting inflection point where we're getting large enough. We see how big our business can be, which again translates to how big our impact could be. We want to make sure that we're serving the homeless community based on their needs. But we donate a lot of socks to a very dense amount of space. It's such an unbelievable joy. But if I go hand someone a pair of Bombas socks, a lot of times they'll recognize them and they'll say, "Oh, Bombas, I love these. I love what you guys do. You sell socks and you donate socks to the homeless." Like the fact that a person who's never purchased a pair of our socks or has never listened to a podcast or seen an advertisement for Bombas knows the Bombas mission because they're the recipient of that. That to me is like blows my mind that we are creating this kind of brand awareness in a community where brands aren't built for them, right? They always get the leftovers. They always get our hand-me-downs. They always get bulk shipments of kind of whatever overstock somebody had created, which again, they're grateful for. But the idea that we're in this position to create a brand by putting them as a customer and thinking about them as a customer, I think is incredibly exciting. And when you kind of lead with that, you start to build the giving side of your business around solving problems within that community the same way that we get customer feedback that says, we want underwear, or we want extra large socks, or we want dress socks, or we want hiking socks. We get to have that same feedback from our homeless customers around what products they want and what features they want. And so we kind of approach it again from kind of a business perspective and see them as a customer base. They just happen not to pay for the product.
I love that. It's so exciting. And I just have to say, to hear the leader of a very successful business say that their growth strategy is essentially, founded on a principle of serving a community which truly needs it is amazing and refreshing. And I think just so inspiring. The fact that this conversation isn't, how can Bombas grow to hit greater sales numbers? What would be the most attractive to our consumer base? The fact that it's always checked in with what you see as a parallel customer base, which is the homeless community. I think it's so amazing. And I've heard of other, one-for-one businesses, but I just don't think I've heard that quite articulated that way. And I just want to call that out because I'm sure at this point it's second nature to you, but I just think that's something that's really special and really worth highlighting. And I mean, do you think that's partly what has contributed to such success with Bombas is just that commitment? And it's not that it's laser focused there. Of course, you're also serving your customers who purchase the socks with a high quality and, you take their feedback as well. But do you think that's part of the story of the success of the company is just your ability to focus on service and to stay clear about what your mission is?
I mean, that's been my experience, right? So like I have nothing else by which to compare it by. And I do believe so because when we survey our customer base, they call out the mission as one of the reasons that they've purchased. And then when COVID hit, like most people, we stopped sending emails about buy the new spring colors, right? Because everyone's like, no one's thinking about like spring colors when they're like, what's going on in the world in this like brand new, global pandemic. So we shifted a lot of our messaging, particularly in our emails, around what we were doing on the mission side. And because we had built this massive infrastructure, which we've been growing over the last 7 years around giving and having giving networks and giving partners, when we had other organizations and partners of ours say, hey, we've got leftover hand sanitizer and sanitizing wipes and bars of soap, and we've got extra sheets from Brooklinen, but these people are all like, we want to do something, but we don't know what to do. And we're like, great, like we'll connect you. And we ended up connecting all of our partner companies up with all of these different organizations based on what they needed, and then told the story to the customer about, hey, we've shifted all of our focus. Obviously we continue to give out socks, but in addition to giving out socks, we're getting sanitary items and, new sheets to homeless shelters because obviously they had such a high turnover and sanitary conditions were of utmost importance. We had seen some of the highest open rates and engagement that we'd ever seen on any of our emails because, again, I think our customers know and they buy into the mission as well. And because it comes from such a place of authenticity, they always say like those with the least in times of crisis suffer the most. And so the fact that, again, we were able to step in and then pull together all of our partner networks to maximize our impact at this time, I think, again, speaks to why we see such success because we come at it from such an area of authenticity.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that makes so much sense. And what do you think that says about consumer sentiment and what it's developing into the fact that there was so much engagement with your messaging because of who you all are and what Bombas does? What does that say about consumer sentiment and the potential for businesses to play more of a role in solving our problems socially and culturally, economically, environmentally? I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I think since the proliferation of social media, right, we've seen that you now have an open channel and an open dialogue with every single one of your customers, right, without having them to have to come to a physical space and talk to you. And if you know how to do it right, and you come at it with a tremendous amount of humility and treat your customer like they, again, are an equal, the same way that I treat any employee or team member in my company as an equal, right? We're all team members. And if you start to treat your customers like they're part of your team, which we've always done from the beginning, we've always said, like, thank you for helping us donate 1 million pairs of socks, because without your purchase, we would never have gotten here. And without your continued support of buying our product, I couldn't then go out and hire people to then work on our giving team to then go out and serve, the homeless community in the way that we serve them. So, like, I think leading with appreciation and recognizing that appreciation, but again, also recognizing that it's a dynamic relationship, and sometimes they're going to be, vocal about things that they want to see from you. And even when, and I say when, because you will, as an organization, mess up, because you've built some trust over the years, they're not going to immediately go, well, you screwed up once, I'm out of here, right? They're going to be so much more resilient to want to work with you and say, okay, look, I know you messed up here, but you came out and you were honest about it. And you also, went above and beyond to address that issue, and your commitments to, better service, or how you're handling, racial inequality, or how you're handling sustainability, or all of these things. I mean, we say, like, we're a company that's 7 years old. We haven't had a lot of time and or financial resources to dedicate to sustainability efforts. And now that we're starting to be a big company with a big balance sheet, we can start to divert some of our funds to create a 10-year plan towards what we want sustainability to mean for us. But we decided in the early days that we were going to focus on giving back to the homeless community. That was our give back component. But I think as companies get bigger, you can't just do one thing, right? You've got to do it all, right? You've got to do diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've got to do sustainability. You've got to have some sort of give back to your community element. But again, we're transparent around and honest and vulnerable about, this is where we stand today. And this is where we want to work towards going to the future. And guess what? We're going to keep you updated in the conversation as we make progress or as we don't make progress.
Yeah, I think that's great. Not only is it looking at business in a new way with just the fundamentals of the model, but also just thinking about the consumer relationship in a new way. And I think at the core of all of that is just this idea that we're all part of this same system. We're all in this together. This company's sustainability efforts combined with this company's giving efforts combined with that company's social efforts coalesce. And each company, as they're being mindful of how they impact the community in all ways, from their supply chain to their outreach to their team, as long as we keep asking that question, I think we'll just continue to serve ourselves better overall.
I agree.
I think just the fact that you're asking these questions, you're committed to defining what sustainability means for Bombas, is a huge step that a lot of companies never take, and certainly not at this stage of growth, even though you all are, as you said, you have positive momentum, you're past the sort of survival phase. A lot of companies don't ask these questions much further down the line, I think. And even then, it's almost an afterthought. So, I mean, I just appreciate that that's where you stand. As soon as you reach the place where you're able to, you ask those questions and you start to build that plan, which, again, I really appreciate.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. It's been an exciting and wonderful journey, and I'm just grateful that we're in a position where we can, have real impact and change, and hopefully be an inspiration for the next generation of entrepreneurs or current generation of entrepreneurs or big companies that are bigger than ours. Because if that's what we can do, if we can help spur on change, I think, real change across the board, whether it's race and inequality or sustainability or giving back to the community, if we want to have real impact, we have to do it together.
Absolutely. And I think showing consumers that it's possible, and to say, with every purchase you make across the board, you can make a positive impact. It's possible. Here are, 30 examples, and let's make it the norm so that every purchase we make from any size company is making some kind of social impact for the better. And the more examples like Bombas that are held up, the more consumers will, expect it and then demand it. So thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciated this conversation. I really appreciate your time. I was already a fan of Bombas, but I have to say I'm even the more so now. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for thinking of us and giving me the opportunity to tell our story.
Listening to Dave speak gets me so energized and so excited. There's just so much potential here. I think Dave is essentially offering a masterclass in what business could be just by doing what he's doing. Bombas is making a difference. Bombas is successful. They're moving toward environmental sustainability as soon as they can. Their employees are volunteering and giving back in their communities directly, outside of just working for a company that's already doing so. The company is good and gracious to its employees, building them up, focused on understanding and growing diversity. Bombas is determined to build and maintain authenticity. I mean, what else could you want? Bombas has proven that it's possible to build a successful business, a financially successful business, which also has values built into its DNA. Of course, Bombas has challenges, like all organizations, and Dave is very open about the areas where he thinks the company can make greater improvement. It's not to say everything is perfect right now, but the fact that Bombas and Dave and his team have made the commitments that they have to building a company that's creating a better world by serving others, supporting the planet by focusing on sustainability, supporting and empowering employees, and everything else they're doing, that's huge for a company to make that commitment, to prioritize all of these different things, and to just do their best. If every single company on the planet were genuinely focused on doing better like this every day, and was willing to make those efforts public, to share that story, imagine the conversations we could be having. Imagine the things we'd be seeing taking shape. Get some juices flowing. Let's move to our 3 changemakers from today's episode. Changemaker number 1. Business can change the world in huge ways. I know I'm stating the obvious a bit here based on the conversation we just had, but let's focus on a couple things that we talked about today. I love the example that Dave came up with of pharmaceutical companies who are generating massive profits every day because of prescription drug prices and what they could do. What if there was a program in place for those in need of medicine that they can't afford to be given free medicine or low-cost medicine? How do you think that would change the culture of a pharmaceutical company, knowing that every day people who need this medicine are getting it, no matter their financial situation? What if more apparel brands, with enough profit to sustain a program like this, made a commitment to donate all of their worn and returned merchandise to those in need around the world who don't have the clothes they need? Or what if every new company that's being formed began to build social programs or giving back programs into their DNA from day one, in whatever way honestly made sense for them? Because as we talked about with Dave, authenticity is key. If you're building programs into your business that don't make sense, that don't line up with who you are, then they probably won't resonate. But imagine the diversity of impact that we could see if every business, from cosmetics retailers to ice cream shops, are thinking about the positive impact they could make, and then committing to doing so. Just like Dave's friend, who was building the coconut-based ice cream brand, and the education programs that she started to support through her business. And some companies might struggle with what their authentic giving back program could be, but there are so many opportunities out there. I mean, companies could make a program which focuses on hiring those who have recently been released from prison, where it's really tough to get a job if you've just been released from being incarcerated. Universities could create programs to donate used textbooks to prisons and tap professors to volunteer to give virtual courses to inmates who want to learn and grow during the time that they're serving. Restaurants could be feeding the hungry, not just the privileged. Tech companies could create virtual volunteering opportunities, which matches employees with technical skills to nonprofits who need some technological support. The opportunities really are endless if we just start to think about them and start to put them into action. And business can make these changes on such a massive scale. Businesses are used to building processes, being efficient, trying to cut costs, doing effective work. I mean, with that mindset applied to impact, there's so much we could do. Business really has such a huge potential. I think it's unique in that way. Changemaker number 2. Businesses that serve are better businesses. Period. Dave and I spoke about how the culture of service at Bombas has made its way into the day-to-day business culture at that company. And Dave believes that this is part of the secret of Bombas' success. This kind of mindset is contagious. It spreads. And when people are giving back to a community just by doing their day-to-day jobs, then I think it makes them more empathetic, more compassionate, more considerate of those around them. I mean, this is almost a no-brainer. Who wouldn't enjoy feeling like their work on a day-to-day basis made a true difference in the lives of others? What if every company gave back in such clear and consistent ways, so that more employees felt like they were doing meaningful work, no matter which job they have within an organization? How would your relationship change to your employer, your coworkers, and your work in general if you felt directly responsible for helping others and building others up on a daily basis? This could happen. I mean, of course it's not going to happen overnight, but it could happen. We've got examples. We just need to do it more. There is a potential that business has to transform our world in ways that we've barely even begun to think about. We're proposing right now a new kind of business culture based on this conversation. Why not? One focused simultaneously on positive impact, both for employees and within the organization, and for communities, as well as a desire for growth and profit. The best part is the hard work is already done. This isn't just an idea that hasn't already been tested. Businesses like Bombas and Tom's Shoes work. We've seen it work. We just need to make more of these kinds of businesses and support the ones we have. Changemaker number 3. Business could be leading the way for all of us. I think it's so easy to get stuck in the mentality that the only major change that's possible will come from consumers, that consumer buying habits are the most effective way to make change within a culture or a society. But what if we started to expect businesses to take more of a leadership role? It's like we've given up on business as being part of the solution because we tend to assume that corporations would never prioritize people or planet over profit. But what are we basing that assumption on? Just what we've done so far. So maybe now it's time to try something new. It doesn't have to be the case that this just goes on inevitably. Business is a huge part of our world. If business changes, everything changes. And if a few large organizations, corporations, showed that it was possible to build human rights and sustainability into their way of doing business, and a trend got started, so much could change so quickly. Think of what it would take for millions of people around the world to buy a pair of socks and donate them to the homeless in their communities individually. Instead, millions of people can simply shop with Bombas, and the rest is taken care of. That's the power of business. Speaking with inspiring people like Dave is like being given a whole new way of thinking about the world, definitely about business. Business can be part of the answer to so many difficult questions we're asking. And if our values really are to build each other up and build a better world, business should reflect that. So what can you do today? You can start by learning more about businesses like Bombas, who are giving back as part of their day-to-day. Learn more about one-for-one business models, companies which donate something for every product they sell, or for companies which incorporate corporate social responsibility, or CSR, which is another way of saying some kind of mission into how they do business. And support as much of these businesses as you can. Let's make sure these models for this new kind of business continue to grow in our awareness and in our world so that we start to see them popping up everywhere. Let's tell these stories more. That's how we get ourselves to expect to see them more. We'll post a list of our favorite impact-driven companies and one-for-one companies on our Bombas episode page. Check that out at wecanremaketheworld.com. Our challenge for you today is to find 3 companies that inspire you with the work they're doing and to do something to support them. Buy their product for yourself or as a gift. Donate, if you can, to the cause that they're supporting, to organizations which are doing work on that cause. Or just spread the word about what these companies are up to by sending information about them to the people in your immediate circle. The more businesses we become aware of who are doing amazing work, like Bombas or Final Straw, one of our earlier guests, who sells reusable products to lower plastic pollution in the oceans, the more we normalize this idea that business can truly be a huge part of the solution to so many problems, the more we'll see it happen. Share your favorite 3 companies with us on social media, in our Facebook group or on Instagram at WeCanRemakeTheWorld, and tag us as you're spreading the word so we can share your favorite companies with other listeners. We want to learn about the companies you love too. And if you'd like to support Bombas and their mission, consider purchasing a pair of socks, which also means you're giving a pair of socks to someone in need. Visit them at bombas.com, BOMBAS.com. I'm truly excited to see what additional products Bombas starts to offer soon. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends, families, colleagues, and collaborators. We're going to keep telling these stories of inspiring potential until we see that potential start to take shape. We'd be so grateful if you'd help us to spread the word. Never forget that you have the power to make a difference every day. Even amid some crazy world events where things are changing rapidly and it's all pretty chaotic, you can still do something to benefit someone else every single day. And that has a huge impact on our world. And never stop believing that a better world is possible. Yes, things are challenging, but when we face challenges, that's when we grow and evolve the most, the fastest. It's not always easy, but we might look back one day and say, wow, this was the time where we really changed course. Thanks for being here with us. Until next time.